Hi, I'm Lana, and welcome to this discussion on the historical books of the Old Testament. So, the historical books are like a rich tapestry of information layered in such a way to examine it from a distance, and you get this entire beautiful picture. But when you get a little closer, you can see and understand the fibers that make up this amazing tapestry. Long in the art of biblical history likens it to a painting and an artist. And there are so many things to consider when we look at the historical books before we can deduce a meaning for us today. So we're going to look at some things. The first thing we're going to consider, based on Chisholm's work in his book that we read for this week, the structure and the features are the first thing to look at when we approach the historical books, and they're unique in that way. They're written in narrative form, story form, so we need to look at things like setting, characterization, and plot. They also, inside of that, are structured in different ways. So not only are some of them narrative in form, they have to be assessed. Are they discourse? Are they dramatic? Do they have parallel sequence? Are they chiasmus? Do they have overlapping accounts with other instances? And are some including flashbacks? So you have to kind of look at a timeline, consider how they're written before you can even delve in to appreciate the smaller literary techniques tucked away inside of them. Things like dialogue, quotations, foreshadowing, parallelism, allusion, juxtaposition. These things that are used by the writers of the Old Testament historical books to enhance the story, to make it come alive, and to help us understand the story to the audience then. The stories then contained in these books are varied. Some of them are told twice, and some of them are just these gems and nuggets. So let's look through the books of the historical books. Joshua first is pretty much a book about how he leads the Israelites into the promised land and kind of commissions them to possess the land and to honor God by possessing the land. And then Judges tells of pretty much how Israel failed to do that. And then it exposes the need for leadership. Next is another story in the book of Ruth that is a gem that's just tucked away. And it's a story of God's provision to two widows, Naomi and Ruth. 1st and 2nd Samuel then picks up where Judges left off. And it's the leadership of Israel and more of the history of Israel. 1st and 2nd Kings traces Israel's history from the reign of Solomon to the exile, so it covers about 400 years. And then 1st and 2nd Chronicles overlaps and summarizes the historical accounts of Samuel and Kings, but the focus is on the Davidic reign and the Davidic, the kingdom of Judah, and establishing all of that. So it has a specific focus. Ezra and Nehemiah then definitely add to Israel's history, picks up where 2nd Chronicles leaves off, but it emphasizes the Lord's commitment to the future of this exiled community. And then Esther is a beautiful story of salvation, of God saving his people through Queen Esther. So once we have the story, we read a story, we need to know how to interpret these stories accurately. Chisholm lays out a 4-step process. First, place the text in its historical, cultural, and broader literary context. So you have to understand, do some study, and then see where it fits into the Old Testament and the Bible itself. Second step is to evaluate the text from a literary point of view. This is where we analyze the structure that I mentioned earlier, analyze those literary techniques that make the story intriguing and beautiful. Third thing is to summarize the theme of the story or the themes and see how they contribute to the theme of the entire book or of the Old Testament. See how they fit into those broader themes. And then lastly, consider how the story should have impacted the people, the audience, the reader then. So some of the themes then that were pulled out have been pulled out by Chisholm, and I'm sure if I studied enough, by me too. But some of the themes in these books are themes of faithfulness, like Joshua, faithfulness of God. Judges, Israel's disobedience and kind of that cycle of disobedience and punishment and then obedience. And Ruth, God's concern for the needy and his faithfulness to those who are committed to him. 1st and 2nd Samuel, the royal ideal through the Davidic covenant. 1st and 2nd Kings, Israel's disobedience again and the consequence, but the promise of the Davidic covenant. It comes with the Davidic covenant. First and Second Chronicles is an optimistic account of the Davidic dynasty, and then Ezra Nehemiah presents themes of rebuilding and the reward of obedience to God. Esther is a theme of God's providence to his people, and these all contribute to an overarching theme of this covenantal relationship with God that he has with his people, and a theme of kingship. So we as students approach the historical books in this way, pull out these theological themes, and then we're able to apply them to our lives today. The way that we go about applying them is, as Chisholm says, we need to establish these theological principles first, and then we need to assess the homiletic trajectory. So he gives an example of the story of Gideon from the book of Judges. And in order for us to come up with a theme that we can apply, we look at these trajectories and see what happened, what theme can we pull out, and how can this apply to God's people today. So those are the structure, the overarching themes, the events that happened, and the way that we can apply them to the Christian life today. Different than other books of the Bible. We have to approach them differently and analyze them differently. Application is paramount, and like the rest of the Bible, they can be applied to our lives. So the theological outcomes that we can pull out of these historical books are a rewarding result of our appropriate biblical analysis. And when Long calls it this art, right? That it's like this work of art that we are assessing. And the process of that analysis is like us looking at a painting, digesting it from far away, but also close up, and looking at these smaller brush strokes. And so that we can appreciate both the greater work, and that we can continue to use that greater work to inspire us and to teach us even today. Thanks for joining me.